Hi, everyone. I'm Gary Berman, and the host of the Cyber Hero Adventures Show. You may notice that I don't have my typical background. That's because I'm in a very atypical situation. I'm broadcasting from Black Hat in Las Vegas. We're coming in for a couple of days. Everyone is being super safe and all that. And it's great to see that people actually have torsos. But I'm cutting my trip short due to the situation with COVID, and wanted to try to do a rapid responder show on something that, at least from my perspective so far, can be a game changer, a good one. On behalf of all of the unsung cyber heroes who toil in anonymity to keep us safe. So today we're going to be talking about the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative, an announcement made just yesterday by the CISA, Jen Ishley, the director of CISA. And to help us unpack this, we have some incredible unsung cyber heroes, including Scott Algier. Hey, Scott, how you doing?
Doing great, Gary. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. In this spontaneous way. Sometimes good things just kind of happen, and I know that you, in your role as executive director of the IT ISAC, are incredibly interested to learn more about the initiative, and so welcome to the show. You want to give our audience just a brief introduction of kind of your mission and that kind of thing?
Sure. So the ITISAC, the Information Technology, Information Sharing and Analysis Organization, is a private sector information sharing forum that was established in 2000 by a leading group of IT companies, IT and security companies. Today, we have well over 100 members from three critical infrastructure sectors: the information technology, the elections industry, and the food and agriculture. We facilitate the sharing of cyber threat information, and the analysts from our member companies collaborate with each other on how to improve security and how to better defend themselves.
Yeah, so you're smack in the middle of this, and I'm sure you and all your colleagues are going to benefit widely by sharing and having a whole of nation approach, which was not my word. I wish I came up with that, because boy, that's what we seem to need, right?
Yeah, well, the whole nation approach has actually been, we've been working towards that for a number of years now. It's an approach that's taken for physical security events. FEMA incident response plan is a whole nation response to physical security incidents. We've been trying to apply it to cybersecurity for a number of years now. It's not always a perfect fit. When there's a flood, you call the fire department. That works, right? If you have a cyber attack, there's so many cyber attacks, it doesn't always work to call your local police department, your firefighters, so to speak, during a cyber attack. But there certainly is planning across the national level, not just within the federal government, but across industry and in coordination with the federal enterprise, federal government. There is more coordination, collaboration, planning that we can do, across those communities.
Indeed, that makes a lot of sense. And to help, fill that in a little bit for us, I'd like to welcome to the show Rick Lemieux. And Rick, thank you so much, by the way, for being one of the sponsors of our show. And look at all these amazing people that have been kind enough to support our mission. And I just want to give a shout out to everyone and say, thank you so much for believing in us. So, Rick, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Can you give our audience a little bit of a briefing on your mission? You've had a long and very important career.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Cybersecurity and cybersecurity risk management is something very near and dear to me and my company. Our focus, just to build off of what Scott said earlier, we're trying to, we provide training programs that help organizations put in place the controls and management systems to help them deal with fires, or actually prevent the fires from happening in the first place.
Right.
And then what if they do happen, to teach them some of the basic things that they need to do in order to put that fire out and get things back to normal again. And what we're hoping to do is this whole national initiative is really important to us. Our focus has actually been not only national but global. What we're trying to do is help organizations across the globe, governments, departments of defense, basically learn how to go about putting in place those capabilities that I mentioned earlier, so that they can at least limit the number of attacks, successful attacks, and for those that do make their way through, which we know they will, basically give them a plan on how to recover from that and get back to a normal set of business after the attack.
Indeed. That's incredibly important and valuable. And speaking of important and valuable, I'd like to welcome to the show Herb Royblatt. Hey, Herb, how you doing?
I'm doing fine, Gary.
Good. Thank you so much.
Sounds like everything around here is going great.
Well, if we're not careful, we'll all be successful someday. You never know. And Herb is a chief data scientist over at Mimecast, but has a varied and interesting background. Herb, can you give us just a little overview of the kind of cool stuff you're working on?
Sure. I mean, Mimecast is one of the cybersecurity companies that you might know about. Mostly, we are concerned with emails and web security and so on. My role is to try to apply artificial intelligence and machine learning and stuff to the problem of cybersecurity. I'm very excited by the announcement that they're going to put a special emphasis on threat hunting, on trying to find things before they become a problem. That's a theme that I've been trying to explore for the last few years, and I think it's a really critical point. Don't wait for the enemy to come to you. Figure out how the enemy is going to come and try to prevent it before it becomes a problem.
Indeed. What a good insight. And to kind of set the table here, we're going to just take a look at really what are critical infrastructures. What is that? So this is the CISA website. You should check it out, CISA.gov for sure. And what I think is interesting about this is just the areas of focus, and it's the United States is so rich in infrastructure, and there's so many different targets. So Scott, let me just ask you. So I'm just going to scroll through a little bit here. Let's just talk about the chemical sector, right? We're all well aware of the attack on the Colonial pipeline, and so let me just open it up to you guys. What do you think about what happened with Colonial and its implications, and how the JCDC, Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative, can help going forward?
Yeah, sure. So without speaking to the details of any attack against any specific company, I think what we're increasingly seeing across the critical infrastructure community is a awareness about the interdependencies across the critical infrastructure sectors. So there is a legal definition of what a critical infrastructure sector is, but it's essentially a industry that is so important to the economy that it's lost to disruption will cause economic harm or substantial economic harm, or that it could has the potential to cause severe death or injury. So there's a list of them that they've been designated by DHS as to what are these critical infrastructure sectors. So one of the way we're organized is around these sectors. So each sector has a risk management agency on the government side and some coordinating bodies within industry, sector coordinating councils. Many have information sharing organizations to facilitate cyber threat information and physical security information sharing within industry. So we've been well established over the last 20 years or so around organizing around these critical infrastructure sectors. There has been coordination across the sectors through the National Council of ISACs on information sharing and the Partnership for Critical Infrastructure Security, now known as the Cross-Sector Security Council, on the policy side. However, recently in the last 18 months or so, there's been a renewed effort within DHS by creating a national critical function. So what we're trying to do here is identify how a failure within a run critical infrastructure elements can cascade across and have impacts on others. So, you use oil and gas pipeline attacks as an example, right? Very quickly, we saw what some of those consequences were of not being able to have those pipelines operate, having gas in the right places at the right time. Obviously, a lot of people went to get the cars filled up, so shortage on gas stations. But also, there were problems with airlines. They had to reroute flights. They had to do stopovers because the airlines, they couldn't get enough fuels in planes sometimes. So they had nonstop flights became, hey, now we need a layover so we can refuel. So we saw fruits just on the pandemic as well. It doesn't have to be a cybersecurity attack, but just in the pandemic, the consequences, it caused all sorts of supply chain issues, from computer chips to toilet paper, right? And having some supplies in grocery stores. So it's that's the concept of looking at this from a cross-sector interdependency approach to identify how a failure in one industry can cascade and have failures across other industries.
I mean,
well, I think that it's important in there to emphasize the supply chain aspect of that, because it's easy to pay attention to the big guys like the oil pipelines and so on, but the oil pipeline may depend on a little guy off somewhere who might get attacked, and you've got to treat it as an entire system, not just as individual organizations.
Well, let's just stay on that point for a moment, Herb, but it's a really great insight. One of the things that I've listened and learned a lot about is that the criminals are horizontally organized. They share information very freely. They help one another. They have affiliate relationships, where the defenders, for a variety of reasons, seem to be more vertically structured, some of which are government regulations and laws, some of it intellectual property, some of that is competition, and other things. How will this new JCDC create a framework that de-risks the sharing of this information amongst the good people?
Well, the president's executive order from a couple of months ago laid the groundwork for that as well. And the idea is that what we need to do is to put those things aside that keep us working as individuals and competitors, but emphasize the relatedness of all of these industries, the relatedness of all of the participants, so that we can mutually support ourselves and solve problems that are coming in from the outside.
Yeah, that really builds, on what Scott said about mutual sharing in that way.
Yes.
And so, Rick, what are your thoughts about this? You've been a participant and an observer in the cybersecurity community for a long time. Is this a game changer? This announcement with the JCDC?
Oh, I think so. I mean, obviously there's still a lot of work to be done, but at least people are thinking about the problem in the right way, and are basically trying to pull together this collaboration so that we can get ahead of this sooner than later. I mean, I think the pipeline incident, as well as other incidents, have shown us that that these attackers can cause some real serious damage. And I think, as Herb mentioned earlier, in the supply chain, and the supply chain may have a direct impact on one industry, but may have a side effect impact on many others. So it's really important for us to begin that process of collaboration and working together. We're not going to share secrets, or we're not going to, in terms of competitive secrets and things like that. It's all about basically items that are common to all those involved. And by being able to communicate's one of the biggest benefits. It delivers the best benefits overall, because if we're able to share and communicate and work together, the likelihood of us solving problems quicker, is far greater. There's basically only three things that organizations need to worry about. It's basically their people, their processes, and their technologies. If we can work together to develop solutions or approaches or methodologies, frameworks, or all of the above, to deal with those three issues. We're 90% there. And I think, the collaborations will allow us to learn ways to do that. So for instance, everything should start with an assessment. So we need ways to figure out how to assess our people, our processes, our technology, so we know where we're at. And then from that, we can identify our gaps and figure out ways collectively on how to mitigate those gaps. Those gaps could be mitigated with some very simple changes or some very complex changes. It all depends on the gap and its criticality. But once again, it takes the nation to come together and work together, because as a nation, we're a supply chain. We all rely on each other,
right?
For just about everything in life, And so let's focus on what's important and get that done as soon as possible, because as you said, Gary, the bad guys are well organized, well educated, well funded, and they love to communicate. So let's take a lesson from them, because it seems to be working for them, and it needs to work for us as well.
Indeed, that's very good advice. Let's take this opportunity to go into some of the details of the JCDC. I'm going to pop up on the screen here the capabilities as stated according to them. And so just to build on what really all three of you said, the first is the comprehensive whole-of-nation planning to address risk during steady-state operations and during an incident. So let me open the floor to that. What do y'all think about that?
Well, I think that it expands on the systems approach that we were just talking about, that not only is each company part of a system of the whole supply network, it's not even a chain of the country, but the data segment of it is part of the system as well. And so if we consider each part individually, we can come to the wrong conclusion than we would come to if we consider the whole thing as an interacting system. I think the biggest contribution of this, from my point of view, is that systems approach, that we see everything as interconnected, and we don't let that overwhelm us. But we don't see things in isolation anymore, because what we found is we can't defend ourselves if we're in isolation.
Yeah, just add to Herb's comments. I totally agree. Risk management or cybersecurity risk management is based on a system of systems. And the folks at the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, NIST, has done a great job of creating the guidance to help organizations, put in place the controls and management systems, to, prevent an attack from happening, and then also the systems necessary to recover from that attack and get back to normal operations, which is really what the first bullet is saying. So I think one of the key initiatives is for everyone in the country, or all the businesses and those who have networks or infrastructure, to get behind the framework and begin the process of adapting that into their world.
Yep. Scott, do you want to add on that?
Yeah. So just generally speaking, there's a lot of bullets up there. I don't know if we have time to get through all of them or not. But just generally speaking about the effort, right? I think it's very encouraging that we're making progress on creating an integrated capability between industry and government. There's some of that now through the NCIC, right, which is great. There's some industry representation at the NCIC. But there's always been this challenge of how do we fully integrate industry into government operations. In May, I think it was 2009, the NSTAC, which is a advisory board of CEOs that issues reports directly to the president, came out with it's the NSTAC Cybersecurity Collaboration Task Force. A report, May 2009, it put together a framework on how to build a scalable model to do this industry government collaboration. If we talk about whole of nation approach, which we've already commented on what that means, but if you look at the joint the partnership program that was developed today, there's 7 or 8 companies involved in that in the center. I think it's a good start, but the that's not a national that's not a national whole of nation capability. So the question becomes, how do we scale this? Um, how do we scale this entity? How do we scale this center so that it does actually represent all of nation, right? How do we get the information sharing centers and the who represent several, from dozens to hundreds to thousands of of companies? How do we get the engagement of the information sharing community into this joint collaboration center? If it's only designed for a handful of companies, maybe that's okay. But how do those companies get picked? How are some companies chosen to be part of it and others are not?
Right.
So the details of how we build out this whole of nation approach through this joint collaboration center is really important. And there's some groundwork has already been laid on this through that NSTAC Cybersecurity Collaboration Task Force report. Hopefully, the people who are building this out will engage with other elements of industry so we can figure out how we can scale this to a national, a whole of nation level.
Well, that's exactly why we're doing this show, and exactly why we're doing it today, because this was announced just yesterday. And what we want to do is to amplify the message, amplify the capabilities, and serve as a network so people can, come together in furtherance of this mission as people come to understand it. Let's take a look at, another bullet point here. Let's just go to the third one: integrating cyber defense capabilities to protect the nation's critical infrastructure. That's what we're talking about. How and Herb, maybe you know this because you mentioned it a little bit earlier. I mean, in the president's initial announcement that you referred to, were there suggestions or actual comments made about changing some of the laws, or rules about sharing information, so you're not at risk?
There were. I don't know how much tooth they had.
No.
And I know a comment that I heard about it is, this is a great start. Now, how are we going to put money behind it? I think that this announcement is, in part at least, a down payment on that, in the sense that, okay, we can't do everything at once. Maybe we can't do everything without Congress, but here's where we're going to start. And I think that Scott's right, that this is a great place to begin. You can only get so many people on the phone in one day. So maybe that's why they started with these particular companies. They're big targets. And we get to then think about how we're going to scale this out, how we're going to make everything work together, what legislative changes need to happen, and what business changes need to happen so that people are willing to collaborate in ways that don't interfere with their own business.
Yeah, exactly. And to build on that, Rick, you've always been very involved in the SME markets, small to medium enterprises and things like that. And just think about what Scott said, sort of the top of his sort of communications, effort. So help. Maybe you can help our audience. Maybe you can help some of the people, from CISA or whoever who are watching our show. How should they connect with all these other suppliers, and all these other small businesses that we're all talking about?
Well, yeah, I'll tell you, that's a really, really good question. I think the key here is that you've got those organizations that have the capability and the people and the infrastructure to support an effective or actionable cybersecurity risk management plan. Okay. Now, even with that being said, there's still quite a few of them that haven't fully done that yet, and the reason we're seeing some of these high-end compromises. Then you've got the small to medium-sized businesses that probably can't spell cybersecurity. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but that's not what they do. They sell pizzas, they're plumbers or whatever. So they're being attacked. They don't even know they're being attacked, and they only know after the fact, after they can't access their cash registers or whatever else. So I think what needs to happen in the small to medium sized areas is that we need to get them involved in this. There needs to be some baseline training that helps these people, helps that community of interest really connect the dots in their head, so they can, at a high level, understand why they should care about this, and at least at a minimum, what sort of actions they need to be taking to protect their businesses. And if we can do that in a way where we add collaboration on top of that, so that these small business companies can come together and share what they've learned, or share any information about, what has happened to them, so that they can at least provide enough information to others to make sure it doesn't happen to them. That's a big step in the right direction. I mean,
forgive the interruption, but just to build on that point, one of the things that we kind of work on is distilling complicated technology information into something people can get their heads around, a little bit. And one of the kind of things that seems to motivate people, small businesses, but really probably all of us, is when changing behavior, like basic cyber hygiene, affects them in their personal life. So, like a small business for sure can have a extraordinarily bad impact on a pizza shop or whatever. But the interesting sort of hook, if you will, is you say something like, in addition to protecting your business, you're going to be able to protect your children from the prying eyes of a webcam in your home. To somehow just make it deeply personal that cyber hygiene or cybersecurity or being safe in this way, is going to help you not just at work, but also in your personal life. What do y'all think about that?
I think that's absolutely spot on. And I'll tell you why, because, anything that we need to, get the nation to get their heads around and become part of needs to have a personal component to it. What's in it for me? Why should I care? Why should I do anything? All right. And that's one of the lessons I've learned early on in the training business, is that a lot of times people show up to our classes and the first question we ask is, why are you here? And 9 out of 10 times it's because my boss told me to come. All right. They didn't take the time to share the reason why they were investing in that training,
right,
and why it was important to the company and why it's important to them individually. And so that is, what needs to happen here as well, that we need to help people connect those dots into, what's in it for me personally. And I think your example of personal protection is something that would resonate quite well. Okay. I think, at the end of the day, we really need to, we need to educate the market. There's still so many people who still answer that phone call from that auto warranty renewal firm that keeps calling me every day, and I guarantee you they keep calling because there are people signing up for it because they don't know. They've never been exposed to this world before. So I think we need to, we need to spend a lot more time helping those small businesses. And I think there's ways to do that get the community involved. I'll give you a quick example. Think about, we've got all these kids in college or going through high school programs where they're looking to become professionals in the cybersecurity space. One of the challenges they face is when they graduate, they have a difficult time finding a job. Why not create a community collaborative where these graduates can come in and start providing these services to these small businesses at no charge or low charge, right? So the two things happening at the same time. The small businesses are getting the help they need to make their businesses and their lives more secure, and these graduates are getting the experiences they need to land a job in the field. All right, so it's a win-win situation. It's no different than here's another perfect example of when the government decided that as the digital revolution was happening, we need to make sure that all local governments, all nonprofits, all businesses that don't fall into the Fortune 500 are capable of participating in that digital revolution.
Yes.
So the government made significant investments in building out fiber optic infrastructure through these organizations. I forget what they call them right now, but there's one almost in every state, or some cover a couple states, and they provide low cost access and fiber optic connectivity for these businesses so they can participate in the digital world. No different in the cyber world. Why can't we do the same thing there? So that's another idea that they might want to think about as they go through, trying to bring this nation together and really working together to get ahead of the problem.
That's incredibly actionable too, because we have another member of the Cyber Hero Network. For those of you who don't know, this is a a subscription sort of thing that we're doing with some of the smartest people in the world to connect people to get things done. And one of our other members is Charlie Tupisa. He is very involved with the Small Business Administration and America's Small Business Development Centers. He has hundreds of thousands of small businesses, and so we'll make sure, Rick, that you connect with him on this idea, and we'll find a way to make things happen. He's doing something with Congress right now, actually, from a legislative perspective about small businesses. So we'll make sure I'll put that on my little agenda to look into. Let's pick one or two more of these important topics while I have you guys here. They said like flexibility in planning and collaboration to meet the cyber defense needs of the public and private sectors. And my experience, and I'll see if you think this is valid, is the federal government has not been particularly flexible. What do you guys think? I'm just saying.
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, we're being recorded here. No, but really, I mean, what do you think? You think that can this be a change? Like a pivot where, because of these initiatives like CISA and everyone, can we show people a better way?
Yeah, there's always an opportunity to improve. I think in order for this to work, Gary, just based on my 40 some odd years of experience in this space, is that the government needs to become a lot more agile. I mean, this is moving quickly. All right, COVID was probably a good example of how we needed to move quickly. Otherwise, we'd lose a lot more Americans. In fact, we'd lose a lot more people overall. So, if you think about the time when we first went into the shutdown and to the time we got our first vaccine, pretty impressive all the way around, mm-hmm. Right? And yes. I think cyber's like COVID. If we don't get ahead of it, it's going to kill us. And so we need to make those investments and figure out how do we make this happen quicker. It's almost like you got to set up an agency outside of the government, or maybe work with a private partner who can administer, this whole program to make sure that it's getting done in a rapid timeline so that we get ahead of the curve. I think if we operate within the current confines of both state and federal governments, it won't happen quickly. And I guess one example of that is these poor people who are getting ready to be evicted. The money's there; they just can't seem to release it quick enough to keep people in their homes. So
yeah. And just forgive the interruption, but you said something also incredibly important, making a comparison, at least on a conceptual level, between COVID and cybersecurity. Coincidentally, we happen to have created this character. This character's name is Vernon the Virus. And we created this before COVID, but just in sort of thinking about it from a creative and communication standpoint, we said, my goodness, even the words that cybersecurity uses are completely related to healthcare. Cyber hygiene. Hygiene is like a big thing in healthcare, as everybody knows. Virus, the word itself, virus. Immunity, all these words, so you really said something that maybe that is a way to communicate the sense of importance and significance and timeliness and urgency of this whole thing. What do you think, Scott?
Yeah, sure. So I think the communication is, communication always is key, right? But I think there's also the different levels of threat that we're looking at, so we need to communicate things differently to different people. Small businesses, unfortunately, a lot of communications to small businesses has been more the technical side, as opposed to these are the quick, easy things that you can do to manage your risks. I'm a small business owner myself. I don't have a whole lot of time, but I'm a security professional, so I understand the importance. Other people who are in retail trying to figure out how to bring people into the doors, restaurants, whatever the case might be, they have other things on their mind. So we need to help them understand why it's important, and more importantly, what those quick things that they can do are. The other point I wanted to make here too is that we have a little bit of expectation setting, I think, across the community here. What we're seeing now is nation states, well-funded nation state adversaries attacking private sector networks, and they've been doing it for years. And it's not a fair fight. A well-funded nation state actor has the advantage, right? And even as these large enterprises become more secure, the adversaries are looking to the smaller businesses further down the supply chain because they're easier to get into. It's not a fair fight, right? So there's been, whether it's these nation state adversaries, whether there's been organized criminal gangs, there's traditionally in the past, there's been very little consequence for these actions on, right? So the consequence falls on the victim. The victim gets fined, right? The victim gets named and shamed in the media. It's the victim that gets the bad press, and where there's no pain being implemented on the people who are causing, or who are doing the crimes, who are causing. And this has been a problem. I remember it has to be 15 years ago, where we were part of government working groups trying to sort through with the cyber deterrence policy. We still don't have a cyber deterrence policy, right? There's still law enforcement. We love them. They're great, right? But there's a lot of these actors that who are committing these crimes are out of reach from traditional U.S. law enforcement, and they're being overwhelmed. So until there's a sense, until there's a price to be paid by these nation-state adversaries and these criminal enterprises, unfortunately, these attacks will continue. But that's not to say that industry can't increase their defenses, or that it's not important for industry to have sound cybersecurity. Of course it is, but we also need to go after the adversaries, and we also need to have a realistic expectation that industry will not be successful in fending off nation state actors against their enterprises.
I mean, there's so much in what you just said, really to unpack. I mean, that it's not a fair fight. Wow, that's just a solid way of describing it and stuff. And the other thing that I would say that is similar from a communication standpoint is you cannot win on defense alone. You have to have some offense. And I mean, let me ask you guys this. I mean, here at Black Hat, I've listened to learn from a lot of people, and now, and I'm sensing a collective sort of frustration, like zeitgeist, where people are wanting now to fight back. What do you all think about that, Rick?
Well, I don't disagree with it. It's like any good football team. You need an offense and a defense to win. I guess the only concern I have with offense is the game's a little different. We don't go home at the end of the day and go, we won or we lost. We basically are, in a cyber world, have to wait for the response. So, right. So it's complicated. I guess that's something that the that the politicians in the Defense Department will have to figure out. I don't think it makes any sense for a business in itself to be on the offense. I mean, that just doesn't make sense. Right. But there may be some that feel that they want to get even. It's kind of like, you broke my window, I'm going to go break yours. What does that accomplish? 2 broken windows. That doesn't really bring any benefit. Right. So I think you're right. I think we going back to what Scott said earlier, there has to be consequences. What those consequences are, there are people who get paid a lot more money than I do to figure that out. But I think until you cut the head off the snake, it's just going to continue to bite you.
Well, on that upbeat note, how do people pay you? Like what do you actually do for the business part, and how can our audience get in touch with you, Rick?
Well, basically, we help organizations, basically understand, where they're at. We help them do their assessments, and then we train them on how to do the things necessary to put in place the controls and capabilities to enable or have that cyber hygiene or those cyber capabilities that will protect their business as best they can. And then we also teach them what to do in the event of a successful attack. So they can reach me, through the website, itsmsolutions.com.
Rick, can you say that a little slower just for me?
Sure. It's my Boston, quick accent here. itsmsolutions.com.
Cool.
Or you could just look up Rick Lemieux, and you'll get to me probably through social media in some way. Highly visible in that area there. But yeah, we have a global network of partners that we work with, so who actually go out and meet with you or talk to you and get you through the process of figuring out what's the best overall program for yourselves.
And we're planning a show from one of your partners, another show on veterans, because of the importance of them. So let Steve know that I'm available anytime that you all want to execute on that. So
absolutely.
So Herb, tell us, is there anything else you wanted to amplify, about your mission, and how does our audience get in touch with you?
Well, Mimecast.com is where you go to find Mimecast. You can find me through that. You can find me on LinkedIn. And I think that the thing I want to emphasize in all this is a place to start. If all we did was have an organization, it wouldn't go very far. It wouldn't have much meaning. We have to actually use it. And it's a constant war of attrition where the defenses improve, the attackers improve, the defenses improve, the attackers improve. But unless we improve the defenses, it's game over.
Right.
So we may not be able to individually be offensive against our attackers, but we can certainly work together to improve our defensive systems.
Indeed. Well said. And that's an important part of our missions. So Scott, we're going to close with you. Anything else you wanted to amplify, and how does our audience get in touch with you?
Sure. So itisac.org is the website for the Information Technology Information Sharing and Analysis Center. And the only point I'd like to add to what we've been talking about here is just to emphasize that just because we may not be able to protect against the most well-resourced nation-state adversary, we may not be able to protect against them 100% of the time. That doesn't mean that there's no responsibility to defend against and to stop the lower profile, lower level attacks that companies see, right? So just because you may not have the resources to defend against a nation state attack doesn't mean you have an excuse to not defend yourself against less sophisticated attacks. So clearly, there is a bit, we need to communicate the business case to all level of enterprises as to why this is important. We need to help them understand the level of risk so that they could take cost-effective mitigations. And I look forward to engaging through the IT-HISAC, of course, with this joint collaborative partnership center and building out this joint whole of nation capability that has the scale to have a meaningful impact.
Indeed. On behalf of a grateful digital universe, thanks so much to Rick, Herb, and Scott for who you are and what you do. And stay on just after we end the recording, because I want to execute on some of the things I said I would do. Because ideas are easy, execution is the hard part. I've learned from some very smart people recently. So, on that note, thank you all for spending time with us today. Thanks for doing what you do. Spread the word about CISA.gov and this new initiative. We hope to do our part, and I'm sure you will as well. And stay safe out there. Have a great day.
Thank you, Gary.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Gary.